Our planet is in big trouble. It's currently experiencing one of the worst droughts in recorded history. But even if it lasted for thousands of years, it would pale in comparison to what would happen if the planet just suddenly went completely dry. Can't imagine all the water that would disappear from the world. But we know that it would affect us humans first and foremost. However, there are other consequences that few people expect, such as the end of rain. And once that happens, then the Earth will be lifeless. Of course, we're not going to die immediately, but this is the beginning of a chain reaction that will lead to our extinction in a few decades. Let's find out more about this scenario in today's episode. What if Earth went dry? The shocking consequences revealed. The first thing that comes to mind when thinking about a world without water is what would happen to us humans. And honestly, we wouldn't last long. A human can live up to 3 days without drinking water, but we need water every day to survive. In fact, our bodies are 60% water. Without any of it, our muscles, organs, and cells would literally dry up, so we would die pretty fast. But what about animals? If Earth went dry, most animals would instantly die. That includes birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish, and mammals. Each species has a different capacity to go without water, but they would all eventually die. For example, camels can live up to 2 weeks without drinking water, but they would still die eventually. Animals that can store water in their bodies, like camels or the desert kangaroo rat, could survive longer, but not indefinitely. But let's think bigger than just our extinction. What would happen to the planet itself? The most immediate consequence of the planet going dry would be that the sea level would drop dramatically. The ocean is the largest body of water on Earth and accounts for 97% of all surface fresh water. If it disappeared, the entire planet would change. First, the continents would get much larger. North America and Europe would merge, and Asia would touch the edges of Africa and Australia. Also, all the water in rivers and lakes would evaporate, and the climate would change drastically. Currently, the ocean absorbs heat much faster than the land. So if the ocean evaporated, the sun's energy would hit the land directly, and the Earth would become an oven. And speaking of the sun, something weird would happen to it. According to NASA, if the moon didn't exist, the Earth's tilt axis would change, and the planet would wobble through space, getting very close to the sun at times. This would cause major climate disruptions. Well, the moon doesn't exist anymore, because it was swallowed by a black hole in an alternate universe. You can watch the video about this on the channel. And anyway, the moon plays a huge role in the stability of the Earth's tilt. If it disappeared, Earth's orbit would change, and it would start orbiting the sun in an irregular shape. This would make the sun much closer to us during some parts of the year and much further away during others. And we all know how important the distance to the sun is for life on Earth. It's the reason why Venus is a hellish planet despite being similar in size to ours. It's just a little closer to the sun, and that makes a huge difference. But let's say that somehow the sun would keep shining regularly, even though the moon was gone. What else would happen to our planet? Oceans are not only important for life on Earth, they also play a major role in regulating the climate. They absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and release oxygen. In fact, half of the oxygen we breathe comes from the ocean. Without oceans, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would decrease, and so would the amount of oxygen. Plants use carbon dioxide to make their food through photosynthesis, so less carbon dioxide would mean that fewer plants could grow. And since plants produce oxygen as a byproduct, there would be less oxygen in the atmosphere. Basically, Earth's climate system would collapse, and along with it, life on Earth as we know it. But wait, there's more. Oceans are also crucial for weather and climate patterns around the world. Ocean currents distribute heat from the equator to the poles and back down. Without oceans, these currents would cease to exist, and the poles would become even colder and the equator much hotter. It might even lead to another ice age. Plus, ocean water is constantly being turned into fresh water through evaporation and then falling back to the ground as rain. Without oceans, there would be no rain on Earth. The water cycle would stop and Earth's atmosphere would change completely. There would be a massive increase in the amount of dust in the air due to erosion, and the lack of humidity would cause storms and hurricanes to disappear. And all of this would have a devastating impact on agriculture. Currently, about 70% of the crops we eat are produced in areas that depend on rain or irrigation from the ocean. With no more rain, growing food would become almost impossible. Even the way we generate electricity would change. Hydroelectric power plants rely on the water cycle and the gravitational force of water to produce energy. Without water, most of these plants would have to shut down. Even nuclear power plants that use water for cooling purposes would be affected and would have to reduce their output. But even if humanity managed to adapt to all of these changes, there's one thing that would ultimately lead to our extinction: the soil. Without rain, the soil would quickly become dry and cracked. Crops would wither and die, and food shortages would lead to famine. But even before that happened, the soil would start releasing methane into the atmosphere. Methane is a greenhouse gas, and its molecules absorb infrared radiation and re-emit it in all directions, trapping heat in the Earth's atmosphere system. As the soil dries out, it would release more and more methane and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, causing global warming. So at this point, you might be wondering, where would this extra carbon dioxide and methane go? Well, that's a great question. And it brings us to the next important consequence of the planet going dry: the plants. As we said before, plants use carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. But plants also store carbon in their tissues. All that wood, leaves, roots, and flowers contain carbon that was taken in from the atmosphere. When the plants die, the carbon stored in them is released back into the atmosphere. So if Earth went dry, all the plants would die and release their carbon back into the atmosphere, causing an increase in global temperatures. And since there would be no rain, no new plants would grow, and the ones that were alive would continue to die and release more carbon. It would be like a never-ending cycle that would turn our planet into a greenhouse. And that's not all. Plants help stabilize the soil and prevent erosion. Without them, the soil would be more exposed to wind and rain, and it would start eroding. This would make farming even more difficult and would contribute to desertification. So to sum it all up, if Earth went dry, we would die along with most other living things on the planet. The climate would change drastically, and our way of life would collapse. But hey, at least we would have some nice views. After all, we would be able to see the sun much clearer in the sky. No more clouds or rain to cover it. What a beautiful view before the world turns into a desert wasteland and we die of starvation and thirst. Cheers, of course. This is just a hypothetical scenario, but it shows how important water is for life. Here on Earth, we tend to take water for granted, but it's a precious resource that we need to protect. What do you think? Would you rather live in a world with no rain or in a world with no trees? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching.